few weeks ago I did a post on my socials about how did the Brontes cope in this sort of weather. Just for you, I must be mad, I have made myself a Victorian petticoat, and I have a very long skirt that I bought from the charity shop, and a pair of leather boots and a pair of Victorian style over the knee stockings outside the Brontë parsonage, and it's looking beautiful. And you know, I'm actually finding I'm quite warm. Anyway, the snow is really setting in now, as you can tell, so I've decided it's time to leave Haworth before I get snowed in. Oh, look at the snow! Hello, I'm home. Oh, a few days later, but I'm home. It took twice as long to get home than it would normally because of the amount of snow, but got there in the end. So much snow fell, it was unbelievable. My car looked like a Christmas cake when I went back to it. So I wanted to talk to you about the garments that I wore, why I chose what I did, and my conclusions from wearing them on the day. Anyway, I'll put my tea down now, so just have a quick slurp. So, let's start off with the undergarments. Stockings. Now, stockings nowadays are what we think of stockings nowadays are up on the top of the thighs. But in the Brontes' time, stockings were stockings. But stockings in the Brontes' time were more like knee-high socks, or over-the-knee socks, I should say. So these were the stockings I wore. Oops! These are the stockings I wore. They're quite stained from where they got wet. And a bit discoloured, but these are not original stockings, don't worry. These, unfortunately, I didn't have time to knit or make a pair of stockings from natural fibres. I could have knitted some and that would have given it a bit of elasticity, but obviously modern day fibres with elastic and lycra gives me a lot of movement. In the Brontes' times, they would have had them over the knees and used a piece of ribbon or a piece of rag to tie them to keep them in place. Obviously, I didn't need that because I had the stretch. I expected them to be falling down within minutes, you know, a few steps down the road and I'll be pulling them back up. But actually, they stayed up really well. I just have bad memories of clubbing in the 90s with over-the-knee socks and they were wriggling down all the time. So we know for definite Charlotte had some white stockings because they're in the exhibition at the moment at the parsonage on display. They would have been easy to have kept clean because they would have gone in the wash with all the other white cotton garments. And garments of that time had to be quite tough. The soaps were quite harsh compared to what we're used to now. So things were made to last because they needed to be washed. So that's stockings. This fashion or this style of stockings lasted for quite a while and was quite common with everybody. And everyone wore stockings this way over the knees. Whether you were in a ballroom somewhere or you were on the Haworth Moor, this was the most common way. So the other garment would have been split drawers, which I didn't wear and I didn't make. I didn't have time. Almost like shorts, baggy shorts that would come to about the knee, and they were plain cotton, straight, maybe a little bit of fanciness around some pin tucks or something. But the main thing about them, they were split. So when I say that, what I mean is the seam that would normally run from the front to the back of the crotch was left open. They would be attached around the waist to stop them falling down with a tie or with a button, but the actual crotch area was open to the elements. This was for ease of going to the bathroom because, as you can imagine, when you have a corset and you have petticoats and you have lots of layers on, you don't want to be shunting them up and down all the time to be able to get to the bathroom. So split drawers. It was more of a preference. Some people wore them, some people didn't. It wasn't necessarily the norm like it is nowadays with underwear. So I think it depended on the person really. the split would have been overlapped a bit, so you wouldn't feel like you had a draft all the time. So I didn't wear split drawers, so I had a bit of a gap between the top of my socks or my stockings to my regular underwear. But like I think I said, it wasn't really a problem. I didn't really feel that cold. The wind never got that far up my legs. So the next garment is the petticoat. I made this petticoat myself. It is made from a fitted bed sheet. Because the crazy world we're living in, it was cheaper to buy the amount of fabric I needed, which was more or less the size of a double bed fitted sheet, than it was to buy the cotton off the ream at a fabric shop. Who'd have thought it? That's what the world's coming to. So with petticoats, around the bottom of the petticoat they used to have embellishments. These are pin tucks, they could have been lace or anything. I think though lace was very expensive, so they would have been for best. You wouldn't have seen the Brontës wearing lace up on the moors. So I added a few pin tucks, which are basically little folds within the fabric that then sewn along, and they create this sort of pattern that's then ironed down. One of the things I discovered about these pin tucks is, I don't know if this is why they were invented, whether they were just for prettiness or for this reason, that when the petticoat got wet, and yes, it did get wet, it almost acted as like a barrier. So the water got up so far and then it stopped at the pin tuck, as if it couldn't get past that section. So I don't know, maybe that's what they were there for, who knows. But the petticoat, it's hard to see, but it did get quite dirty around the bottom, but it's no surprise really. Petticoats would come to the ankle, not touching the floor, to protect them a little bit from walking in the elements. And they were attached, the waistband. Then on this one I've done buttons. Some of them were done with ties. It all depended. Personally, I quite enjoyed the buttons. I knew I had that bit more security that it wasn't going to fall down whilst walking around. So that was the petticoat. Oh, my legs are going to sleep. So there would have been an option of a warmer petticoat, which would have been like padded. It just gave them a bit more warmth, which you would have had with another petticoat over the top. Layers, they loved layers. And it would keep them warm. I mean, I didn't have that, but I wasn't too bad. But I could imagine when you were going home to a cold parsonage, having that extra layer while you're out was just what you needed. So far we have stockings, split drawers. Well, I didn't, but they would have had split drawers, and a petticoat or two. Petticoat very good for keeping the shape of the skirt as well. So that was their main reason, not just for keeping warm. So they would have had a shift, which is like a petticoat, but like a full body, more like a nightgown, and that sits against the skin. And again, that needs to be hard wearing, it needs to be cotton or linen, and it needs to be able to be put through the wash hundreds of times, because that's the item that's going to get dirty from your skin, from the oils, from the sweat. And then they would have had their corset or stay over the top. We also know that the Brontës wouldn't have had a huge wardrobe of clothes like we do nowadays, so the chances are they probably would have only had a few dresses. One would have been Sunday best, one would have been winter, one would have been summer, and maybe a few more. So the chances of them actually wearing their best clothes out, I think, is very unlikely. If they were going for a walk on the moors, I think they would have changed into older clothes. My mum used to call them plain out clothes when I was a kid. The clothes that you would wear that's a bit tatty and a bit old, go out, get muddy, your mum doesn't mind. So I would have thought they would have had some clothes kept somewhere that was just for walking, because I can tell you now, peat stains, and there's a lot of peat up on the moors. And I don't think Tabby would have been best pleased if they'd have come back with peat-stained petticoats, because again, you would have only had a few of them. You wouldn't have umpteen amount of garments like we do in modern life. So that's underwear. Then we're looking at the skirt itself. So I bought this skirt from a charity shop. It was 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 sizes too big for me, and I took it in around the waist for this particular project, but the length was perfect, so that was fine. Obviously it's a modern day garment, but it's cotton, so it was a good idea to see how it would have been for them. Most of the Brontës dresses would have been made from cotton. At the time they were starting to have more patterns available. It's easy to work with for sewing, and it could dry quite quickly. So if they did get wet, you could hang it up and it would dry quite well. Most dresses would have a facing at the bottom. So modern day, we have a hem and that's finished. But then they would have had in the inside a few 4 inches or so of another fabric, something quite hard wearing, attached to the end of the skirt and on the inside. And this would mean all that traipsing about on cobbles and stuff, when the end of the skirt got dirty and became worn, they could literally just replace the facing, not the whole dress, and it allowed dresses to last a lot longer, which is why we've seen some survive, and they were hand-me-downs to everybody because they knew how to protect them. So we often think of wool and tweed when we think of Yorkshire, and silks and all these other fabrics that were available, maybe for best, not for the Brontës, not at that time, expensive for starters, but also tweed and wool, when they get wet, are very heavy. They also can be quite smelly, and they were hard to keep in good condition. Silk would have been for a ballroom, not for your everyday life on the moors. So I would think most of the garments the Brontës would have worn on a day-to-day basis would have been cotton. So the other thing we haven't talked about is boots. So I wore a pair of modern boots. I could have got some replica boots from that period, but they would have cost an absolute fortune. And I had a feeling that stomping about in mud, or snow in this case, it probably would have ruined them, and I wasn't going to do that. So I wore a pair of my leather boots. Obviously they had modern soles, which is a bit of a shame, but my feet soon got wet, so they didn't do that much to keep me dry. At the time of the Brontës, they would have had leather boots. We've seen some in the parsonage. They are on display at the moment, so we know that they had leather lace-up boots. The fashion was also for these side lacing boots. So like nowadays we have the zips on the inside of the boots, they would have had something similar, but it would have been laces. The other popular thing at the time was to have a fabric body of the boot, and then at the end, on the toe and the heel, there would have been some leather to give protection. We know they had them, but we also know they had leather, full leather boots. Again, whether they would have had them for traipsing up the moors, I don't know. It could have been an old pair that they used. We don't have any evidence to say what they wore because it hasn't survived, but at the time, I'm sure it would have been leather boots. Not very waterproof after a while, quite slippery, as I found with mine, even with my modern boots. And once the water gets in, your feet get freezing, or at least mine did. Hello, I'm back. So my conclusion. I decided natural fibres were amazing, and us modern humans should use them a lot more. They dried quickly, they were warm, even though I had so few layers on, really, when you think about it. I was actually quite warm. And yes, the leather boot thing wasn't great, but I can say petticoats, why don't we use them more? They are brilliant. So yeah, it went really well. I had a really good time as well. There were so many people at one point coming up to me asking what I was doing, traipsing around in the snow, trying to record myself, which, yeah, I did look a bit silly. But I really enjoyed the long skirt. I had such a warm welcome in the church as well by the people in there, and I was welcomed to the service, and that was lovely. And I kind of felt like I'd step back in time a little bit and experience something the sisters would have experienced every day. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. The other conclusion I came to was that the sisters would not have gone traipsing across the moors in weather like that. In rain and snow, they would have looked out the window and not today. I mean, the start of Jane Eyre is there was no possibility of taking a walk that day. You know, Charlotte wrote that herself, and that must be the case for them as well. You know, they were not going to go traipsing in snow up onto the moors. They weren't going to do it. So my other conclusion is, yes, they must have had playing out clothes like when we were kids that they would have used only for getting muddy and dirty. And yes, life was cold in Haworth, and I can imagine the cobbles with the rain and the snow and probably sewage on were very slippery a lot of the time. So they either had a very good balance or they were very good at avoiding the areas that were slippery, who knows. But overall it was a great experience, something I want to do again. Oh, I just thought something I haven't told you. Once I'd removed the snow off my Christmas cake car and I was coming home, I found that the fabric of the skirt and the petticoats was sat on my legs and it was really quite cold. As soon as my stockings got wet, I felt cold. I think that was the overall conclusion really. So I got halfway home and I decided I was really cold and needed to get changed. But everywhere seemed to be closing early because of the snow, so there wasn't really anywhere I could go. So I pulled over and into a supermarket car park and decided I'll get changed in the back of the car. So there I am getting changed and the car pulls up beside me and a family gets out and this kid is giving me the funniest look through the window while I'm trying to struggle taking wet stockings off. Did you know how hard that is? It's like wet socks but longer, so it's harder. So yeah, advice, if you're going to get covered in snow wearing 19th century style outfit, don't drive home in it, or don't get caught by a kid in the car park getting changed. So there we go. So thank you very much for watching this video today. I've had a brilliant time. Thank you for all your suggestions and your advice and your support. If you could do that whole likey, comments, subscribe thing, it helps YouTube realise that people do want to watch this sort of thing, and that would be brilliant. So I have more videos coming up, more adventures, and I will keep you updated on my socials about these things. If you want to follow me on social media, have a look in the description. I've got all that information in there. And I hope to see you next time. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.